Thanks, John. So that means you're not going to get the talk you expect. But maybe you expect not to get it. Can I operate it? Is that, yeah. See, even that's different, right? This way. Right. So obviously I wanted to give a presentation that wasn't, well, this is what my group's doing. Sorry, Peter, and those, that's fine, but I just wanted to do it a bit differently. I wanted to be interesting, important, relevant, but I also wanted it to be something you might not have thought of before. It had to be something that I knew about so that I could tell you about it. And it's, of course, it's got to be relevant to CCI. So this isn't about results. That's not what this presentation contains. It's only questions. If you want results, certainly we've got them. Come and talk to me. So the motivating factor for me in anything I do is what I value. What is it in the world that I really care about? And maybe when I was 20, at the time I thought, well, the thing I really care about are what you can do with computers. But in the last 30-something years, I've changed my mind. And the things that I really value are actually nothing to do with computers. But my expertise is in computer science, like most of you. So this talk then is about really what I've learned from what my group does that helps me to preserve the things I value using the skills that I've got. And as a researcher, I hope you also feel the same way, that the things you're doing are there to help the world in the way that you can help it. And each of us is going to choose that differently. So one of the things that I value, and all of us value, is food. And in particular, the thing I value about food isn't just for me, it's for the people who really have not got enough of it. Okay, so we're sitting here happily munching on 50 different varieties of cake, but that's not true for most of the world. Another thing I value about the world is the natural environment which we're so easily and rapidly destroying. And that really concerns me. And as a computer scientist, you know, churning out CO2 on deep learning algorithms, that's a problem. I take it quite seriously, and it really does worry me. I'm also concerned about our native Australian flora and fauna in particular, because no one else in the world really cares about them outside of our country. But the problem that we've got is sometimes the things we do butt up against the things that we love. And I was riding my bike, as John mentioned, along this road out on the Mornington Peninsula in between some lockdowns a couple of years back. Came across this poor echidna. I spent half an hour trying to get this echidna away from the road. And I sort of now see a lot of my work in research as doing that, right? The echidna might be something I value, and the things that I do every day are often damaging that. And I mean deep learning, I mean computer science, I mean buying a mobile phone and throwing it out after a few years. And en masse, when billions of those phones are manufactured and thrown out, we create pollution, we introduce CO2, we mine minerals, and we make a mess of the planet. So to turn back to what we do at Monash and as researchers, we have this thing that we study. And it might be that it's a large language model that we write and then explore. It might be a computer vision algorithm that we look at and we try to improve and understand. It might be an optimization algorithm that we optimize and that we apply to optimize other things. Or a time series analysis approach that we analyze. You got the idea, right? This is the thing that we do. This is how we identify ourselves as a researcher. And this little box here is actually not the end of the story. And so what I want to encourage, especially the new young researchers here who are starting out on their careers, is, I guess, literally to think outside that box, not just to think about the box. Now, if that box was something like a self-driving car, you might be so engrossed in trying to understand how to make that self-driving car navigate successfully, avoid obstacles, and you might say, well, I'm, thinking about society because my cars won't hit people. I'll go, yeah, well, that's certainly important, okay? But what I'm asking you to do is actually to look even further than that. We might have a box that lets us understand what people think. It can sell stuff to them. It can predict our decisions. It can allow us to recognise unusual decisions. We can use these boxes to teach and explain things to humans as well. And if you're like me, your little box might contain lots of living things, little bugs and critters, and we might wonder, well, how can we mimic those things using technology? How can we support them? How can we monitor them? Sometimes we even might want to destroy them. I'll get to that later. So whatever it is that fits in here, that's your box. But what happens when there are lots of those boxes? Not just lots of those boxes, what happens when there are lots and lots of those boxes, or even more? Now, some of you are working, for instance, on more than one vehicle routing, and you're thinking, well, what happens if this vehicle is going to hit this person and it's going to now have to adjust the path of all these other vehicles? I want to go from Melbourne to Madrid. That's fine, here's my route, but how does that affect everyone else's routes? And how does that affect the transport network as a whole? But I also wonder, how does it affect the rest of the planet? So many of us are looking at not just routing vehicles and so on, but what's the impact of what we do on the natural environment? And we can extend that further when we look at how people interact with AI. Some people have questions about AI and they're genuine concerns. Others don't mind, they'll just use it. And we'll survey these people to get opinions and we'll explore how they interact with AI. But not everybody's like us. And many of us tend to forget, and we get a very small group of people as our kind of intended audience. And that's why you end up with middle-aged white guys like me telling you stuff instead of, across the world, a much more diverse community of people speaking about AI, for example. These people have concerns. Some in our group are wondering, how can technology interface, for instance, with the elderly? So I'm thinking here of more varied, for example. We've also got many people working across the group, so they're working in Peter's group, of course, on energy networks. We've got people within our group who are also looking at energy and how you make a system that's resilient to attack or to collapse of some components, how energy can be distributed amongst users with different demands, and all of that fits quite naturally across a number of different groups, but also in particular it fits quite well into ours because we're looking at what's the impact of this on the rest of the planet outside of human society. We've also got members in our group, Julian, who's around, he'll give a talk a bit later, who are looking at often how society operates by looking at game theory to understand how individuals interact, how the decisions that they make influence others. And what's important is not just that some of those people are voting, it's that they're communicating with one another, and that influences their vote. And then the vote in turn influences the people who made the vote or who liked a post on Facebook or Twitter. But it doesn't influence everybody equally. And so some groups get left out of the decision-making, left out of the discussion, even though they're the ones who are heavily impacted in many cases. And that's a great concern. Part of our group also looks at these three things here: the monitoring, simulation and management of ecosystems and ecology and the processes on the planet using technology. And as you can see here, I've kind of drawn the boundary around these boxes as sort of a porous thing in order to highlight the fact that this relationship between technology and the environment should not be considered as two separate things. So even this computer sitting here while I'm running this, even that projector up there, has impacts on people on the other side of the planet who made it, who dispose of it, and who have to breathe the CO2 that's emitted whilst we run these projectors. So then, what's your black box? And what is it that you can do in order to improve the interface between your black box and the rest of the planet? And I suppose if there was one thing that kind of captures what our group does, that's it. It looks at the relationship between these black boxes, whether they be AI or other kinds of technology, and tries to understand how these relationships are formed and how they can be better shaped to improve whatever it is that we're looking at. Now, there's one particular example I wanted to give you from some of my own previous research here. You've probably seen these things on people's houses. right? They're basically a modern scarecrow. Whereas an old scarecrow from, say, 100 years ago used to be made out of a few bits of wood, some straw, and some old, probably cotton or wool clothing, the new scarecrows are manufactured in Asian countries far from here, out of materials that are extracted from the planet and that can't usually be recycled and returned to the planet. They're made out of plastics that break down into microplastics. They're made out of chips that have many parts that are very difficult to extract once they've been put together. Now, these things, firstly, are intended to move, in this case, birds, from your garden to your neighbour's garden. Now, leaving aside the fact that these are hopeless and they don't actually work, right? Even if they did work, what you would be doing is shifting animals whose natural habitat we've destroyed out of your garden, an opportunity that they may have to find the resources that they need. And you're putting them in somebody else's garden where they don't have one of these scarecrows. By doing that, you're enhancing the likelihood that the grubs in your garden are going to eat your fruit and vegetables. And you're changing the dynamics of the system that maybe you didn't need to change, or that you'd be better off not changing. Now, the problem with these things isn't just limited to back gardens, right? So there are many researchers around the world who are tech-focused. And they go out there and they think, oh, I build this tech. I build a micro unmanned aerial vehicle. What can I use it for? Oh, I know, I'm going to help nature with my vehicle. And they forget the whole life cycle of this product that they're designing because they're engineers. And one of the problems with this view that, well, I'm the engineer, what happens out there isn't my problem, is that we end up with billions and billions of devices that aren't sustainably produced or disposed of. And as tech people, my kind of request to all of you is to think about the greater picture, about what it is that you do. Now, most of these, but not all of these devices, are made with the intention of helping the environment. So I'd say people they've got the environment at heart. They've kind of got the idea is there, and they're just not really executing it very well. So what do we do about it? Now, in my case, I work with bees, and this is one of the worst examples of ecosystem intervention that I can imagine. And you've probably seen me talking about it, or like all the posts on Workplace lately in the media. But these robo-bees have proposed by about 10 to 12 labs around the world as one day replacing the pollinators, the natural pollinators, that we should instead be preserving. And these engineers are adamant that these micro-robots are going to pollinate flowering plants. For some of the reasons here, I can tell you that this will fail abysmally. It is not possible to replace the 20,000 species of bee, let alone the hundreds of thousands of species of flies, butterflies, beetles, ants, and all the other insects and the birds that pollinate our crops with drones. Right? It can't work. And even if we were to try, we would ruin the planet trying. So this is the kind of thing that really concerns me. And I thought, well, what the hell should we do about it? And in effect, I'd say at this point, we really need regulation. Is it coming? Nah, not really. Is it something I'm working on? Yes, absolutely. If anyone wants to help, I'm happy to talk to you about it. But I did come up with these kind of preliminary guidelines, which myself and some others have published. It's not in a top conference, but it is in a conference. It is published. It has a timestamp. And the reason I came up with these is obvious, I hope, in light of what I've just said. But a few of the kind of main points that I want to bring out are listed here on the bullets. So the first one, I hope, is obvious, that we've got to look outside our own little area to try and understand the implications of what we do on all parts of society and the planet. And that means if I manufacture a device or I use a Raspberry Pi in the field, I have to think, who manufactured that? Where did it come from? Where did the materials come from? And what happens when I've finished with it? And if I forget those external influences, I'm being naive about my impact on the planet. I can't use that Raspberry Pi and claim to be bettering the ecosystem by monitoring it if I haven't thought about the overall impact of that device. I want to minimise my intervention, and that's something that a lot of electronic engineers don't think about. They think, oh, I'm going to put this device out there and forever it's going to do its job. A far better way to think about your interaction with the planet is to understand it, improve it and manage it to the point where it can manage itself, so that we don't need to keep throwing out pieces of technology that try and improve things when nature's been working fine for billions of years without us. Now, the last one, I'm going to skip right to the bottom there. Intentionally harming organisms only as a last resort. Unfortunately, because of the way we interact with the environment and the natural habitat, we move species around. We muddle things up. So you probably heard about Varroa destructor coming here to Australia, right? That's the mite that damages honeybees. And everybody's very concerned. But most of you might not have realised that the honeybees on which they attack and which they prey were introduced here 200 years ago. They're an invasive pest as well, but one which we've become dependent on for our pollination. But they outcompete our native bees, of which there are about 2,000 species. So the point here is we've got to think carefully about these relationships that we're managing, and sometimes it may be necessary for us to harm organisms for the betterment of the whole ecosystem or for the planet in general. So it is something we have to take seriously. So that's kind of a summary of what we do, and a kind of a personal outlook at the end there on one way in which we can approach this kind of research. The group's contributions across all of those areas are many and varied, and I will conclude there. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Alan. I think we've got a minute or two for a question or two, if anyone has anything. Do we have someone up here? Yep. Ah, Hamid. I think he's coming around. It's a long way to get to you, Hamid.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Alan. Very interesting talk, and I think I completely agree with this is the most important direction everyone needs to take. But my question is more like kind of philosophical question. Is everything we do since like human being is try to kind of care about use of technology for human life convenience. Like we create cars, planes, blah, and if you just see everything we develop over the years, it's just for ourselves, nothing about the environment. My question is that considering this selfishness and then big company powers, like look at how like a current AI does, where big company invests on it, big models, lots of heat, global warming is related to that. It's eventually how we can, even if from today every people work on the university, even work on this direction, how we can really save. Is it better to not to do anything for technology and leave the planet build itself? Okay.
That's a complicated question, and there's no simple answer. So a project I worked on recently was with someone from the medical faculty looking at the climate and carbon footprint of digital health interventions. And there's no doubt in this case that digital health interventions in general can improve the health system. And in that case, because it's human health, it's very clear to people that they have to now weigh up the impact of what they're doing to help humans against the damage that they do to the planet. And my concern here is that the impacts and the benefits don't necessarily balance as I personally feel they should. And so whilst I say, well, yeah, we should develop all this new technology, a lot of the time I do wonder if it's worth it. And so my approach is, as I said, to actually look at ways to use technology that we can later withdraw. So the robo-bees are a good example. If you introduce the robo-bees, you outdo, in some cases, the natural insects, and you do without them and you destroy them, and now you're left with just the robots. So if you're thinking about that as a long-term strategy, it's not sustainable. So what can we do? My thought is to consider that whole cycle and to understand when we're pumping carbon out into the atmosphere, we can't be doing that indefinitely. And we've got to stop it in some way. So to think, well, what is it that I can do that changes the way I approach my problem solving? So that technology becomes something we use and then we stop using, not something that we become dependent on.
My question is how we can save the planet. I mean, eventually the goal ultimately is to be useful, like not in the personal level, in global level. And my understanding is even the whole researcher around the world really invests on this direction. And still we are out of we can't control everything in the world, you know?
Thanks, Hamid. I'll let you arm wrestle Alan at lunchtime, okay? Sorry, Ariel, I'm not even going to ask you to speak. You can follow up with Alan at lunchtime, but thank you. Don't go. Please join me again in thanking Alan. That was fantastic.